Hello. Today I am going to take you through making this little gauge swatch for Sonia's holiday. Now, what you can do, you can use it as a mug rug or something if you want. If you were doing that, I'd probably recommend that you don't use acrylic like this is if you're going to be standing anything hot on it, because acrylic might melt. So if you want to be using it as a sort of a placemat or a mug rug, then do probably use cotton. That will be a lot safer. But anyway, just as a gauge swatch, this is it. Okay, so this is the one I've already made in the acrylic yarn. But obviously I now need to show you how to do it. So what I've got, I'm actually using the other yarn, Sonia's Holiday calls for, if you want to do it, which is Stylecraft Recreate. And this time, I'll put that one out of the way. This time what I'm going to do, I've actually written the gauge swatch instructions, so you can use multiple repeats if you want, and you could actually add the pattern to, or this design to your project. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to just make the single repeat there, which would be the gauge swatch. I'm actually going to take you through, I'm just going to add an extra repeat to it, just so you can see how they fit together. Okay, so we don't actually start with that colour, we're going to be starting with our sort of main colour, our background colour. Okay, and for that we need to now make, well, the instructions tell you to make 29 chains. I am actually going to make 53. I'm adding on an extra 24 so I can get 2 repeats in. Okay, but it's up to you. You can do as many repeats as you like. If you want to start your Sonia's Holiday project with this pattern, what you will need, you'll have to make sure you've got a multiple of 48 plus 5 stitches. Okay, so because that's the way that all of the patterns will fit together. Even though this one's a 24 stitch repeat, some of them are more. So, but they will all fit into a multiple of 48. Okay, so pick up your MC yarn. And what I do when I'm starting my chains, I don't usually actually put a slip knot on the hook. You can, it's absolutely fine if you do, but it's easier to sort of unpick if you've got like an extra stitch at the end if you haven't knotted it first. So what I will do is I will actually just twist that yarn around like so. Okay, and pull a loop through. So if I now pulled that tight, it would effectively become a slip knot. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it loose, and that's going to be kind of like a bonus chain, just in case you miscount, and then you've got like that extra little chain you can work into if you need it, and if not, you just pull it tight and it's your slip knot. Okay, so you will now need, if you're only making the gauge swatch, you will now need 29 chains. I am actually going to be making 53. Okay, so just go on through. Don't pull your chain. If you find you tend to chain really tightly, you may just want to use a sort of 0.5 millimeter larger hook, a slightly larger hook for your chain, just for your chain. I don't, but so I'm going to just carry on using the hook I'll use for the main swatch. Okay, so make your chains and then come back to me when you have got the correct number. Okay, so I have now got 53 chains, not including this first loose one. Okay, now the instructions that I've given you for the gauge swatch there tell you to fasten off there and then start again with a new piece of yarn. Now what I am gonna do is actually, the reason I say to fasten off is if you are going to be using this as a mug rug and leaving a fringe, by fastening off at the end of your chain, you will get an end at each end, so that'll be evened up. If you know that you're going to be creating a border, then what you can do, rather than fastening off, you can just do one extra chain, which will be like a turning chain. So that's what I'm now going to do. Okay, so if you're doing the gauge swatch and you're going to make it a mug rug, then fasten off at this point. You shall have your 29 chains and you'll fasten off at this point. What I'm going to do is add a turning chain. Okay, so now what we do, so we're still in that sort of row 1 instructions. That was just the starting chain. This is now going to be row 1 proper. We're not going to be working into these parts of the chains. Now the reason for that is when you come to do the border, you're going to need both of those loops, because with the overlay mosaic crochet, or in this pattern anyway, I'm going to be adding a envelope border. I mean, the gauge watch doesn't, but this is to sort of show you how to do it if you were going to be making the main blanket as written. We're going to need both of these, one for the front border, one for the back border. So what we need to do when we now start our row of stitches is to turn the chain around, and you can see you've got these extra, like a third little lump, a bump, or a third loop, kind of got that mixed up, on the back. Okay, so we're going to be working into them. So I'm missing this first one because that's my turning chain. Now I'm going to start in there with my first double crochet. And then also for the border, to make it nice and easy to start your border, we're now going to be leaving a chain at each end of every row. Okay, so one chain, miss this chain here, and then we work double crochet into this next bump. Okay, and then you're just going to be basically working all the way along, doing your double crochets into this back bump. Okay, now the reason for doing a chain, I know some people like the sort of chainless foundation double crochets. Now I don't do that for this because I want to have these chains right at each end of absolutely every row, including the initial chain. And if you did your standard sort of chainless foundation double crochet, then you wouldn't have that space there. Okay, so that's why I tell you to do a length of chains and then work your double crochets into the back bump. Okay, so what we're now going to do, if you're doing the gauge swatch, you are now going to have a run. After this chain, you're going to have a run of 25 double crochets. So that's the 24 for the pattern, and then there's like an extra one we add on just to balance things out. Okay, so go along and do that. If you're doing what I am with 53 stitches, then you're now going to have 49 double crochets. Okay, so if you carry on with that, that should just then leave you a couple of chains at the end. So when you get to that point, come back to me and I'll take you through the next bit. Okay, so I now have 49 stitches after my initial chain there. So if you're doing the gauge swatch, you should now have 25 double crochets there. So then we're going to be finishing off every row the same, basically, which is a mirror image of the start of the row. Okay, so that's one chain, miss a chain, and then double crochet into that last one, and then fasten off. Now to fasten off, basically we need to just pull this loop through that one. Okay, so what we're going to do, effectively make a chain, pull that up a little bit, leave at least, I would say, sort of 5 or 6 centimeters, a couple of inches, and then cut that off, and then we can pull that one out, and there you see we've got that chain with the loop through, and you can pull that tight, and that's nice and secure at the end there. Okay, so as you can see, I didn't actually need this initial chain, but if I'd found that I'd miscounted somewhere and I needed an extra stitch, I could have worked into that. I'm not actually going to pull it tight yet, just in case. We'll just wait until we've actually done our first pattern row to make sure 100% certain that we have got our stitch counts correct. Okay, so just to say, run you through where I say you need a multiple of 24 plus 5 stitches, just in case you're still sort of wondering about that. So if you had done started with the 29 chain, remember we had our 24 stitches for the pattern plus 1 extra to even it out. Then we've got a chain at each end, so that was 24 plus 1 is 25, so that would be 26 and 27 at the other end, 28, 29 with our edge stitches. So that's where the plus 5 comes from. Okay, the stitch to even it out, then 2 chains and 2 edge stitches. Okay, so for row 2, it's another nice easy one. We're now going to pick up our contrast colour, and this time we are going to start with an actual slip knot on the hook. Now I'm not very good with real slip knots, so what I tend to do is basically, like I told you at the beginning of the chain, I'll twist that round and pull a chain through, and then I will pull that tight, and that works just like a slip knot. Okay, you just need a nice secure knot on your hook. So now what we need to do is make sure we're working into the correct part of our row 1. So if I lay that flat, hopefully you can see these top loops. You can see them just tilted towards you. Okay, so that's how you know you're on the front. If you'd actually got that twisted and it looked like that, can you see how it looks different? You can't see those loops at the top, and we've got an extra sort of loop at the bottom here. Okay, so this is the wrong way. And I'll just show you here why we worked into the back bump. Can you see you've now got there both loops available right at the bottom of your project, so you can work the border into that if you're making a border. Okay, so there we go. We've got the top loops tilted towards us, so we know that's the front. Okay, so now I'm picking up my hook with my slip knot on it, and we're going to work in this very first stitch here. I'm going to work under both loops, so it's a standard double crochet. Okay, oops, then 1 chain, and we're going to skip this chain, so we'll be doing this at the start of every row. You'll be doing a standard double crochet under both loops in the first stitch, then a chain, miss a chain, and then what we do, our main stitch, really the sort of background of all our overlay mosaic, is a back loop double crochet. So a double crochet worked into the back loop only of the stitch, so not like that. If you're doing a standard double crochet, you'd be working under both loops like that. We're not going to do that. What we're going to do is just pick up that back loop, okay, like so. So we are now going to do a whole row like that here, nice and easy, a whole row of back loop double crochets. Now I know some people, when they are doing back loop double crochets, also like to pick up, remember I mentioned the extra loop, they also like to pick that up. I don't, because that will sort of stop the stitches stretching up. I don't ever do that with overlay mosaic for 2 reasons. One, it's not really necessary. You're not going to get any loops showing there, and also you're going to be having, a lot of the time you're going to be having stitches, like you'll be working your trebles over the front of that, and these front loops may lift up, so they'll be the bits you see mainly. So I don't see the point in that, and also it will just squash your stitches down a little. So if you just literally work into this back bump, you should get pretty much square stitches, which is what you really want when you're doing your overlay mosaic crochet. So there we go, carry on like so all the way along until you get to that end chain, and I'll see you there. Okay, so I've now got to that last chain at the end of row 2. So I'm not going to show you the end of the rows anymore after this one, because they'll all be the same. When you get to the last chain, it's always 1 chain, miss the chain, and a standard double crochet under both loops at the end. Okay, and then fasten off. So just a little note actually about these chains on the end. Try not to pull them too tight. You don't want really, really loose chains, but try not to pull them too tight. So the chains at either end, keep them so you will be able to easily get your hook into them, okay? Because we'll need to do that when we make the border. Okay, so that's row 2. Now we can actually start making up the pattern. So we're back to our main colour again, or background colour. Slip knot on the hook. So just like every row ends the same, they're all also going to start the same, okay? They'll all start with a double crochet, whoops, under both loops, then 1 chain and miss that chain. Okay, so they'll all start the same. Then we have the, remember I said about the balancing stitch, the stitch that like evens out the pattern. Well, I put that at the start of each row of my instructions. So that will be, if you're looking at the written instructions, there'll be 1 more stitch now before our formal repeat starts, okay? And so for row 3, that is a front loop treble. So if you're looking at the written instructions, that will be a red capital F, okay? That's where I donate what some people will call a mosaic treble, or indeed double crochet if they're using US terms, but remember this is UK terms here, so that'll be maybe a mosaic treble or a drop down treble, but it's basically a front loop treble 2 rows down. So we're not now going to be, whenever you see an F, you're not working into this row, you're working 1 down, and usually that will be the same colour as you're currently using. Not always, when you're switching colours that might be different, but generally that's what that'll be. Okay, so 1 treble. Now remember, this is the chain we missed, so we're now going to insert our hook into there and work our treble there. Okay, now if you find when you do that you get these sort of loops like that, there's 2 things you need to do to try and minimize that, and that is, one of them is making sure you keep this top loop not too big. So if you find you're getting quite big loops on the top, just tension that slightly before you make your stitch. Okay, and the other thing you need to do is not pull the rest of the stitch too tight. Okay, so just tension that, not really tight, but just so it's a nice even sort of loop on the top, and then insert your hook in there. And say, don't pull this bit too tight. That needs to be a little looser. Okay, so that will then mean that your stitches should be nice and even, and you won't be pulling that loop up too much. Okay, so I've actually now just done that first stitch in the actual repeat. Okay, so we had our edge stitch chain, 1 treble before our repeat started, and now our repeat starts with 2 front loop trebles. So if I do another one in there, that's that bit done. Okay, so that is how you create the pattern with overlay mosaic crochet. You've got a background of back loop double crochets, and then you drop down some trebles to the row below to cover up some of those, and that's how the pattern's created. Okay, so we've now got 1 back loop double crochet. Now what you have to make sure you do now is you see we've got this run of 3 trebles there, make sure you're missing the 3 stitches behind. So this is our chain. Then we've got 1, 2, 3 stitches that are behind these 3 trebles. Okay, so you know you're going to be working your back loop double crochet into there, and what you should be able to do, if you lay it out nice and flat, you should see that, yeah, that is right above the next stitch. Okay, so now we've got a run of 17 front loop trebles, so we're making sure we missed that 1 front loop there in front of the back loop double crochet we've done, and now we've just got to do 17 front loop trebles. 3, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so when you have done a long run of any type of stitch like that, whether it's the back loop double crochets or the front loop trebles, it's always a good idea to just double check. Okay, so we have got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 trebles. Okay, then we have 1 more back loop double crochet, and our repeat ends with 3 front loop trebles. Okay, so if you're doing the gauge swatch, you will now be at that chain at the end of the row. As I'm doing 2 repeats, I'm now in the middle of my row. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I should have mentioned before, you may have noticed, got a marker here. So what can be a good idea to do, at least to begin with, until you get used to the technique and also get the pattern sort of set up properly, if we just now pop that marker in that last stitch we did, we have now marked the last stitch of our repeat. Okay, so that'll come in handy as a double check when you do future rows. Okay, so I've now done that first repeat, so this now the second one is going to start with 2 more front loop trebles. Okay, 1, 2. Then we've got our back loop double crochet, and then we're going to have our run of 17 front loop trebles again. Okay, and so on. So I will carry on and complete this row, and if you come back in a second, I will see you for row 4. Okay, so that's row 3 done, and I just thought I'd show you at the end. So there we go. I have ended with my 3 front loop trebles, then I've got my chain and my edge stitch. So that all works out fine, so I can now finally pull that tight. Okay, so everything's secure there. You don't need to worry about weaving any ends in, because what either if you're making like a mug rug or something and you want a little fringe, we can just trim them off later, not too sure. Or if you're making the border, if you're going to be adding a border to it, then we'll be just tying these together to make them extra secure and then cover it and hide in them in a border. So don't worry about the ends. I know it can be a little bit scary seeing all these ends, but don't worry, if you do the border especially, it looks beautiful at the end. Okay, so that was row 3 done. So now we are switching back to our contrast colour. So obviously we start as we do every row, slip knot on the hook, standing double crochet, and 1 chain. Okay, now there's only 1 stitch we can actually do now. If you're looking, when you've got a row of trebles, when you've got trebles there, you can't do a treble because there's no front loop available. So you'll know that these have got to be back loop double crochets. Now, if you happen to be following a pattern that appears to tell you to do a treble here, probably you have miscounted somewhere, because that should never happen. Obviously, there could be a mistake in the pattern, but usually it is just that you've miscounted. So it's always worth checking back and see if you've gone a little bit wrong somewhere else previously. Okay, so what we're now going to start with, as I said, we've got the 1 back loop double crochet before our repeat starts, and then our repeat starts with 2 more. So that was all you can do there anyway. Now the next stitch, you have a choice. It's possible to do a back loop double crochet or a front loop treble. So look and see what the pattern tells you to do. And in this instance, we are doing a front loop treble. Okay. And then we've of course got our 17 back loop double crochets across here. Nothing else we can do. (15, 16, 17, 1 front loop treble, and then 3 back loop double crochets, which takes us nicely to, that'll either be, if you're doing the gauge swatch, your chain at the end, well, the chain will be there, or we've now got our marked stitch showing the end of the first repeat. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to leave this marker here, because on row 5 we're going to be working a front loop treble into that. So if we put it up there, it's kind of behind and behind, so I'm actually going to leave it where it is on this row. Okay, or if you move up, it doesn't really matter, it's still just indicating where the end of that repeat is. So I'm now going to start again with the next repeat with 2 more back loop double crochets, 1 front loop treble, and then obviously I'm now going to have my 17 back loop double crochets. So I'm going to carry on and complete this row, and then I'll come back in a moment and we will run through row 5 together. Okay, so row 5, I'm going to be starting as always, slip knot, standing double crochet, and 1 chain. Okay, now again, before our repeat starts, we have 1 more front loop treble, or a front loop treble, and then we start our repeat with 2 more. 1, 2. And now what you'll see, if you're looking at the written instructions, you'll see that we've got some square brackets. So whenever you see the square brackets, basically whatever is between those brackets, you do the number of times it says after them. Okay, so our brackets tell us to do 1 back loop double crochet and 8 front loop trebles. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. I will just double check that I didn't somehow lose count. 2, 4, 6, 8. Lovely. So that's 1. We've now got to do that again. So we've now got 1 more back loop double crochet and another 8 front loop trebles. Okay. 7, 8. And our repeat ends with another back loop double crochet and 3 front loop trebles. 1, 2, 3. Fabulous. So obviously if you're doing the gauge swatch, you will now be at the end of your row, at your last chain. I'm now going to just carry on again, so I'll be starting again with 2 more front loop trebles and so on. Okay, so carry on and complete that and come back and we will do row 6 together. Okay, and what I forgot to say was I've also moved that marker up there now. Okay, so if you don't feel you need the marker, that's fine, but I've just got it there just to show us where the end of our repeat is. Okay, so I've now started row 6 with my edge stitch and indeed the edge chain. Okay, so now we have 1 back loop double crochet before the repeat, and then our repeat starts with 2 more. Okay, and now we're basically on this row just going to be working double crochets, trebles where we had our double crochets and vice versa. Okay, so we have got 1 front loop treble and then 8 back loop double crochets, and they are in the square brackets. So as I get to the end of this, I'll be doing it again. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So then we've got another front loop treble and 8 back loop double crochets. 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we're going to end our repeat with another front loop treble, whoops, and 3 back loop double crochets, and there we are nicely. That last stitch is nicely in our marked treble. So again, I'm going to leave that marker where it is for now. Then I will carry on and complete the row. And then we'll come back and we will do row 7 together. Okay, so I have now just got started on row 7 with the edge stitch chain, and then there's a front loop treble before we start our repeat. So the repeat is now 1 more front loop treble. Okay, then we've got 3 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, then 5 front loop trebles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, then 5 back loop double crochets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and another 5 trebles. Five, 3 back loop double crochets, and then our repeat ends with 2 front loop trebles. Okay, so that's that. So I'm now going to carry on obviously and finish my row 7 here, and then I'll come back and we'll run through row 8 together. Okay, so I've now just moved my marker up there, and I've got started on row 8 with the edge stitch chain, and then there's a back loop double crochet before our repeat starts. So then we start our repeat with another back loop double crochet. Then we've got 3 front loop trebles, 2, 3, then 5 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have 2 front loop trebles, 2, 1 back loop double crochet, and then another 2 front loop trebles, then 5 back loop doubles, 4, 5, 3 front loop trebles, and then we're going to end our repeat with 2 more back loop double crochets. Okay, so I'm going to carry on and complete row 8, and I think you should be able to do row 9 on your own as well now, so I will then come back and we'll do row 10 together. Okay, so this is how it's looking after row 9. So, and I've also got started obviously on row 10 with the little bits and pieces before we start our first repeat. So we now have 1 more back loop double crochet, 3 front loop trebles, 2, 3, then 3 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, 2 front loop trebles. Then we get to some more square brackets. So for that one, it says do 1 back loop double crochet and 1 front loop treble, and do that twice. Okay, back, front, try again, front, then 1 back loop double crochet and 2 front loop trebles. So we're now working across our sort of central wider bauble there. Then you've got 3 back loop double crochets and 3 front loop trebles, and then we're going to end our repeat with 2 more back loop double crochets. There we go. So as always, I am now going to carry on and complete my row 10, and I'll do row 11 and then we'll come back and we'll do row 12 together. Okay, hopefully you can now really start to see the bauble starting to take shape there. So this is what mine looks like after row 11, and I've got started on row 12 with the usual bits and pieces before our repeat. Okay, so our repeat on this one starts with 5 front loop trebles, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we've got square brackets straight away. So in that we have got 1 back loop double crochet and 1 front loop treble, and we're going to do that 6 times. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Then 1 back loop double crochet, 5 front loop trebles, 4, 5, and we're going to end our repeat with just the 1 back loop double crochet. Okay, so I think, to be honest, you probably know enough about all the stitches now. That is all the stitches you need to know for, basically, apart from when we get to the border, for the whole of Sonia's holiday. There's no special stitches or anything weird in that. So you just carry on. What I will do, I will just come back every couple of rows and just show you a photo of what your work is supposed to be looking like at that point. Okay, so I've showed you how to do the gauge swatch using the recreate yarn. I've now just gone back to my original little one using the special DK, just to show you, because obviously this is only the 1 repeat, that'll make sense of the measurements that are in the pattern. So rather than, in the past I've said it's so many stitches to 10 centimeters, but I found that has confused a few people because obviously the swatch is a bit bigger than that. So for this one we are literally just going to be measuring this swatch. Okay, so I've got my ruler here. So what we have, you lay it across there, you can see that is 15 centimeters wide, which is exactly what the special DK one's meant to be. And if we twiddle it round, you can see we've got fractionally under 13 centimeters that way. Okay, so that is how you measure your swatch. Now if yours is a slightly different size, it doesn't really matter if you're happy with the way it looks and the sort of drape and feel of it. The only thing you need to bear in mind is that if your swatch turns out to be bigger than mine, you may well use more yarn than I did. So, and obviously your blanket would be bigger as well, so just bear that in mind. But yeah, so that's that. Now this, I'm not going to show you any more videos for this pattern apart from the border, because there's no special stitches in this one. It's all just the nice basic overlay mosaic stitches that we've done here. So you should be good to go with the whole pattern until we get to the border. So I have done a special video, or I will do a special video just for that.